You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. A fissure of static split the quiet, a dry rasp through the baby monitor that coiled ice around my vertebrae. An hour, maybe more, since I'd tucked the children into their beds, yet the sound that followed wasn't the whimper of a restless toddler or the murmur of a bad dream. It was male, a low, serrated whisper slithering from the speaker. "I see you." Paralysis seized me. My gaze shot first to the heavy front door, bolted and chained hours prior, then snapped upward toward the shadowed stairwell leading to the children's rooms. Impossible. How could anyone be up there? And the truly chilling thought, how long had unseen eyes been tracking our movements? My name is Sylvie, 17, navigating the final stretch of high school, hoarding babysitting earnings for the looming expense of college. This gig, watching the Thorne children a couple of nights weekly, was usually a haven. Mr. and Mrs. Thorne were pleasant. Their children, 5-year-old Nora and Leo, barely 2, were sweet bundles of energy, and the pay was always fair. Nearly a year I'd worked for them, a comfortable rhythm established, utterly devoid of incident. Until this night. The evening had unspooled with comforting predictability. I'd arrived at 6, exchanging pleasantries with the Thornes as they departed for a rare night out. Pizza money sat on the counter, emergency contacts magnetized to the fridge. The 8:30 bedtime edict delivered firmly but kindly. Midnight, maybe a little later, Mrs. Thorne had offered, her smile genuine. Don't hesitate to call. Hours melted away easily. Pizza devoured, board games contested, baths navigated, and finally, both children surrendered to sleep, precisely on schedule. I retreated to the living room sofa, textbook open, basking in the sudden, profound silence of the house. That's when the first tremor of unease surfaced. A peripheral flicker, a brief distortion of light outside the wide picture window. I rose, peering into the sodium orange wash, bathing the empty lawn. Nothing but stillness. A passing car's headlights, perhaps. I dismissed it, sinking back into the cushions, but the sensation lingered. A prickle between my shoulder blades, the distinct feeling of being observed. Every settling groan of the old house became a footfall. Every sigh of the wind, a breath held captive. I flicked on the television, seeking solace in its manufactured chatter. Just past 11, the monitor spat its venomous whisper. Instinct screamed, "Flee!" Bolt out the door, dial emergency services from the safety of the street. But the children, Nora, Leo, what if the source of that voice was already standing over their beds? My fingers, slick with sudden sweat, fumbled for my phone. Help was essential, yet the smallest sound felt amplified, potentially fatal. A call risked betrayal. Texting Mr. Thorne felt safer, quieter. Emergency. Someone in house. Call police. Almost instantly, my phone vibrated, Mr. Thorne's name flashing on the screen. I stabbed the decline button, heart hammering against my ribs, convinced the ringtone had echoed through the silent house. My thumbs flew again. Can't talk. Upstairs, WW. Kids, hurry. Relief, thin and fragile, arrived with his reply. Police on way. Coming home now. Stay safe. I stood rooted at the base of the stairs, the frantic pulse in my ears drowning out the television. Ascend? Confront whatever waited? Or would that merely escalate the danger, pulling the children into the path of violence? Before the choice could solidify, footsteps sounded overhead, measured, deliberate, pacing from one room, pausing, then moving to the next. Then, abruptly, silence descended once more. The monitor crackled again, the voice returning, laced with a horrifying intimacy. "Come upstairs, Sylvie," it murmured. "The children want to say goodnight." Panic clawed at my throat. My name. How? What had been done to Nora and Leo? My eyes darted to the phone, praying for the flashing herald of sirens, but the street outside remained stubbornly dark, inert. A ragged breath hitched in my chest. Action was imperative. I couldn't remain paralyzed while a monster lurked above with those innocent children. My gaze swept the room, searching for leverage, for defense. It snagged on a substantial table lamp, ceramic and heavy, scant protection, yet infinitely better than bare hands. I yanked the plug from the wall, the cool weight grounding me slightly as my damp palm clenched the base. Planting a foot on the bottom step elicited a loud groan from the wood. I froze, straining to hear any reaction from above. Nothing. With excruciating slowness, I began the ascent, each step a small eternity. The quiet pressed in, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by my own jagged breathing and the frantic drumming within my chest. Reaching the landing, I hesitated, senses screaming. Which door? Nora's room lay closest, the door slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of impenetrable darkness. I nudged it wider, the hinges emitting a faint protesting squeak. Dim shapes resolved in the faint luminescence of a princess nightlight. I could discern the small lump beneath the covers. Nora, seemingly undisturbed. But where was the intruder? I crept toward the bed, reaching out to gently jostle her shoulder. "Nora," I whispered urgently. "Nora, wake up. We have to go." No response. A cold dread tightened its grip as I pulled back the duvet. Pillows, artfully arranged to mimic a sleeping child. A floorboard sighed behind me. I spun, lamp raised high, ready to strike. The doorway stood empty. The hallway stretched beyond, swallowed by shadows. My breath came in shallow, painful gasps. Where were they? Where was he? Backing out of Nora's room, my eyes scanned every shadow, every corner. Leo's room was next, its door firmly closed. My trembling hand reached for the doorknob. The instant my fingertips brushed the cold metal, I heard it. A giggle, unmistakably childish, echoing faintly from downstairs. I froze solid, mind refusing to connect the dots. Impossible. I'd been guarding the stairs. No one could have slipped past, unless they were never upstairs to begin with. The revelation struck with physical force, the voice on the monitor, the footsteps, a cruel misdirection. He'd been downstairs, with me, all along, and now, the children. I pivoted, intending to plunge back down the stairs, but Leo's door swung inward. A figure filled the frame, a towering silhouette stark against the room's deeper blackness, head nearly brushing the lintel. "Hello, Sylvie," he breathed, the same chilling whisper from the monitor, now immediate, intimate. "I've been waiting." Thought evaporated. Pure reflex took over. I swung the heavy lamp with every ounce of strength I possessed, aiming for the dark mass where a head should be. A sickening crunch echoed in the confined space, and the silhouette buckled, collapsing inward. I didn't pause, didn't look back. I fled, hurtling down the stairs, stumbling, nearly falling in my frantic escape. The children's voices were clearer now, drifting from the kitchen. I burst through the kitchen doorway, poised to snatch them, to run, and stopped dead. Nora and Leo sat at the table, spoons in hand, contentedly eating bowls of ice cream. Standing beside them, faces etched with confusion and concern, were Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. "Sylvie?" Mrs. Thorne's voice was tight with worry. "Good heavens, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I stood there, gulping air, my reality fracturing. "But the man, upstairs, the monitor." The words tumbled out, nonsensical. Mr. Thorne moved closer, placing a steadying hand on my arm. "Sylvie, there's no one else here. We got home a bit early, found the kids still awake. They said you told them they could have a late treat." I shook my head, mute, unable to reconcile the terror with this mundane scene. Mrs. Thorne gently steered me toward a chair. "I think perhaps you dozed off, dear," she suggested softly. "A nightmare?" As the adrenaline began its slow retreat, doubt seeped in. Could it have been a stress-induced hallucination? It had felt shatteringly real. "But I hit him," I mumbled, the memory vivid. "Upstairs, the lamp." Mr. Thorne vanished up the stairs, returning moments later. "All the lamps are exactly where they belong, Sylvie, and there's absolutely no one up there." I sat numbly while they offered reassurances, attributing the episode to exhaustion, the pressures of school. They insisted on driving me home. Yet, as I gathered my belongings, the tremors still vibrating through me, the certainty of the fear lingered. Dream or not, the icy voice, the suffocating sense of being watched, it felt too potent, too present to be mere phantasm. Later, cocooned in the back of the Thornes' car, I stared out at the sleeping suburban streets gliding past. One thing felt absolute. My babysitting days were over. Then, a flicker in the rearview mirror, just a fragment of a second, a shape coalescing in the darkness behind me, a wide grin splitting the face, revealing far too many teeth. I whipped my head around. Nothing. Empty vinyl seat. Just my overactive imagination. It had to be, didn't it? This lakeside cabin, meant as haven, swiftly warped into a cage. My car tires crunched on the gravel drive as twilight bled across the water's placid face, painting the sky in hues of bruised plum and fading gold. Here, finally, the corrosive weight of recent months might lift. The air, sharp with pine and damp earth, promised dissolution. This sequestered weekend, stripped bare of connection, no signal, no web, no voices save my own internal chatter, was the prescribed cure. Just myself, the quiet hum of thought, the deep embrace of the wild. From the boot, I hefted my overnight bag, its weight a familiar anchor. The wooden steps groaned a weary welcome underfoot as I ascended to the porch. The key, provided by Waterside Retreats, turned smoothly in the lock, a small, satisfying click that belied the discord waiting within. I swung the door inward, anticipating the cool, empty space, ready to sink into silence. Instead, the air met me thick and lived in, redolent of wood smoke and something simmering, savory and unsettlingly domestic. Odd. A vacant rental shouldn't smell like habitation. Stepping across the threshold into the main room, my breath hitched, snagging painfully in my throat. There, sunk into an armchair, flanking the hearth where low flames danced, sat a man. A half-empty tumbler of amber liquid rested near one hand. The other held a dog-eared paperback. His head lifted at my entrance, his gaze, initially startled, hardening swiftly into a flinty resentment. "Who in God's name are you?" The question cracked through the quiet, harsh and accusatory, as he surged to his feet. I jolted back, instinct overriding thought. My bag slid from my shoulder, hitting the floorboards with a dull, definitive thud. I'm Elara." The name felt foreign, thin in the charged air. "I rented this place. For the weekend. Who are you?" His eyes, shadowed and intense, narrowed. "My house. This is my house. Whatever nonsense you're talking, I don't know it. You need to get out. Right now." My thoughts spun, a frantic scramble for logic. A mistake, surely. A crossed wire at the agency. My fingers scrabbled in my pocket, retrieving my phone, the screen flaring to life with the confirmation email. "See?" I offered it, a fragile digital shield. "Waterside Retreats. The booking's right here." He waved a dismissive hand, not even deigning to look. "Means nothing to me. This is home. Years I've been here. You're trespassing. Leave, or I involve the authorities." Ice traced a path down my spine. Something felt deeply wrong, skewed. Taking another hesitant step back, my hand groped blindly behind me for the reassuring solidity of the doorknob. "Right, okay. Clearly some confusion. I'll just head back, sort it with the agency." As I pivoted, a swift movement blurred behind me. Before comprehension could dawn, his hand crashed against the door, slamming it shut with violent finality. I froze, feeling the warmth of his breath stir the fine hairs on my neck as he leaned close, his presence a suffocating weight. "I don't think so," he murmured, the sound a low growl that vibrated against my skin. "You've seen me. Can't have you running off, telling tales." My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, terrifying silence. Slowly, stiffly, I turned to face him. Closer now, I saw the feral glint in his eyes, the untamed growth of his beard, the grime ingrained beneath his fingernails. This wasn't just living, this was hiding. "Please," I whispered, the word barely audible, strangled by fear. "I won't say anything. Just let me leave." He shook his head, a slow, deliberate motion. A smile touched his lips, utterly devoid of humor. "Oh, Elara," he said, the name a mockery on his tongue. "You're not going anywhere at all." The ensuing hours dissolved into a disorienting miasma of terror and frantic, useless calculation. My phone, my sole tether to the outside world, was wrenched from my grasp and dashed against the unforgiving stone of the fireplace. I watched, numb, as the screen spiderwebbed into 1,000 irreparable fractures, extinguishing my last flicker of hope for summoning aid. He bound my wrists with aggressive strips of duct tape, the adhesive biting into my skin, then propelled me into a cramped, musty bedroom, the click of the lock echoing behind him like a final judgment. Perched on the edge of a thin, lumpy mattress, my mind raced in panicked circles. How had meticulous planning, the reputable agency, the shared itinerary led to this? The very seclusion I'd craved, the deliberate severing of ties, now revealed itself as the architecture of my entrapment. Through the thin partition wall, I could hear him moving about the cabin, restless footfalls, indistinct mutterings that prickled the hairs on my arms. Sometimes the steps would pause outside my door, and my breath would catch, lodging itself high in my chest, a silent prayer that he wouldn't turn the key. Each time, eventually, the sounds would recede, leaving me alone again in the suffocating quiet. As dusk deepened into true night, the cabin surrendered to shadow. I strained against my bonds in the blackness, every small movement amplified by the clumsy tape. With painstaking effort, I managed to nudge the window sash upwards. Just a crack, enough to admit a sliver of cool, lake-scented air and the gentle, rhythmic shushing of water against the shore. Outside, such profound peace. Inside, a maelstrom of fear. How long I sat like that, I couldn't say, ears straining for the slightest sound of approach, eyes scanning the impenetrable dark for any potential weapon, any advantage. The moon climbed, a cold, distant observer, casting elongated skeletal shadows across the floor. Then, abruptly, slicing through the night's low murmur, the sound of an engine, distant but growing closer. My heart vaulted, a surge of desperate electric hope. Could it be? Someone checking the property? Stumbling to the window, I pressed my face to the cool glass, peering through the dense lattice of trees. Twin beams of light pierced the darkness, sweeping nearer. Hope solidified into frantic action. I began to hammer on the window pane with my bound hands, shouting, my voice raw and cracking. "Help! Please, help me! I'm in here!" The vehicle slowed as it approached the cabin's turnoff. I screamed louder, pouring every ounce of remaining strength into the plea. "In here! Help!" Suddenly, heavy, rapid footsteps pounded down the hallway. The bedroom door flew inward, crashing against the wall. He was there, a dark silhouette against the dim light from the main room. In an instant, he crossed the space, one rough hand clamping brutally over my mouth, stifling my cries, the other arm hooking around my waist, dragging me forcibly away from the window. "Shut up," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper directly in my ear. "One more sound, I swear to Christ, I'll end you." We stood locked together in the suffocating darkness, his arm a rigid bar across my chest, his breath hot and ragged against my temple. Outside, car doors opened, then closed. Voices called out, clear and achingly normal. "Hello? Anyone home?" Tears, hot and silent, tracked paths down my cheeks. Rescuers, so impossibly close, just the thickness of a wall away. His grip became a vice as footsteps crunched on the gravel path, then echoed on the porch boards. A sharp rap sounded at the front door. "Waterside Retreats, we received a report about a possible booking issue. Just checking if everything's all right in there." A scream built in my throat, a desperate primal urge to betray my presence, but it died instantly as something cold and hard pressed against my temple. He had produced a gun. The unspoken message hung, lethal and absolute, in the charged silence. Utter a sound, and it would be your last. We remained frozen, scarcely daring to breathe, as the voices outside called out a few more times, punctuated by another, more hesitant knock. Then, after an agonizing eternity, the sound of retreating footsteps, the slam of car doors, the engine turning over, fading into the vast indifference of the night. As the last vibration of the departing vehicle dissolved, the man's hold on me eased fractionally. "Good girl," he murmured, the praise chilling, lowering the weapon. "See? Cooperation works." He steered me back towards the bed, pushing me down onto the mattress. "Right, we move. Can't stay now they're sniffing around." He began to pace the confines of the small room, agitated fingers combing through his already disheveled hair. "First light, we're gone. Get some sleep if you can. Long day tomorrow." He exited, the lock tumbling shut once more, sealing my fate anew. I curled into a tight ball on the thin mattress, my body racked with tremors, suppressed sobs shaking my frame. My single chance materialized and then evaporated, leaving behind only the chilling certainty of an unknown future tethered to this volatile stranger. Adrenaline ebbed, leaving a profound, bone-deep weariness in its wake. Against all logic, despite the terror coiling in my gut, exhaustion claimed me. Sleep offered no respite, only fractured visions of endless shadowed forests and a man with haunted eyes, perpetually just behind me. Birdsong, bright and insistent, pulled me from the depths. For a disoriented second, stretching against the unfamiliar mattress in the soft wash of dawn, light filtering through the window, I forgot. Then memory slammed back with physical force, and I sat bolt upright, gasping. He stood in the open doorway. He'd changed his clothes. The rough edges seemed slightly smoothed, clad now in cleaner jeans and a shirt. Seen on a street, he might pass for any other lakeside visitor enjoying the summer. "Time to move," he stated flatly, tossing a small backpack onto the foot of the bed. He held out a bundle of clothing: denim, a plain t-shirt, a lightweight jacket. "Put these on." My gaze flickered from my still-bound wrists to his impassive face. "How?" He exhaled, a sound of weary impatience, and produced a knife from his pocket. My breath caught, a sharp intake of fear as he stepped towards me, but he only leaned down and sliced cleanly through the duct tape. My wrists stung, red and raw. "No stupid ideas," he warned, his voice low. "I'll be right outside this door. 5 minutes." The moment the door clicked shut, a desperate energy surged through me. I scrambled into the clothes, fingers clumsy, mind racing, calculating. This was it. The only chance. The window, still slightly ajar from the night before. If I could just... One leg was already over the sill, the cool morning air shocking against my skin, when the door flew open again with explosive force. His face was a mask of fury as he lunged across the small space. I shoved off hard from the windowsill, tumbling outward, landing with a jarring thud on the damp earth below. Pain flared in my palms and knees, but I ignored it, scrambling upright, instinct taking over. I ran, blindly, towards the glint of water through the trees, towards the lake. Behind me, I heard him crashing through the undergrowth, the sound fueling my frantic pace. I didn't look back. The wooden planks of the dock materialized ahead, a pathway to potential freedom. I sprinted onto it, my lungs burning. A small motorboat bobbed gently at the far end, tethered loosely, my improbable, final hope. I reached it just as his heavy footfalls began pounding on the dock behind me. My hands trembled violently as I grappled with the damp, stiff rope, my fingers slipping, fumbling, finally managing to cast it free. I half fell, half jumped into the boat, nearly pitching myself into the cold water in my haste. The engine caught, sputtered, then roared to life with a guttural cough just as he reached the end of the dock, mere feet away. Our eyes locked for a charged, suspended moment. In his, I saw the predictable rage, but beneath it, flickering nakedly, was something else. Fear. He knew the game was over. I slammed the throttle forward. The boat surged, leaping across the lake's glassy surface, carving a white wake through the morning stillness. I didn't ease up, didn't dare slow down, until the cabin had shrunk to an insignificant speck against the vast, tree-lined shore. Only then, as the immediate threat receded, did the reaction hit. A violent, uncontrollable shaking seized my body. Tears streamed, blurring the landscape, tears of raw relief, of residual terror, of sheer disbelief at the nightmare I had somehow navigated. I steered the boat towards the opposite shore, where civilization beckoned in the form of clustered houses and private docks. As I drew closer, figures appeared, pointing, a man already jogging down to the water's edge, ready to help me land. My legs threatened to buckle as I stepped onto solid ground, the earth blessedly firm beneath my feet. Strong, steadying hands reached out, concerned voices washing over me, asking questions I couldn't yet process. Through the blur of tears, I managed to force out the essential words. "Call the police, please." Later, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, watching the distant flashing lights of police vehicles converging on the cabin across the water, the irony struck with chilling clarity. The place I'd chosen for sanctuary, for escape, had nearly become my sepulcher. The path forward felt long and shadowed. Official statements, the inevitable replays in my mind, the slow work of mending the psychic fractures. Yet, looking out at the lake, now serene and sparkling under the climbing sun, a profound, quiet gratitude settled within me. I had stared into the abyss and somehow clawed my way back. Whatever lay ahead, there was a newfound certainty. I possessed the strength to face it. The lakeside cabin, intended as an escape from the world's complexities, had instead delivered its most brutal, indelible lesson. Darkness resides not in places, but in hearts, and survival lies not in fleeing it, but in meeting it with all the fight one possesses. Barely 3 weeks under this roof, and the silence of night has become a stranger. Never before had the darkness whispered with faint creaks or phantom scrapes from above. Never had a simple orb of helium, buoyant and benign, become an object of fixation, a marker of unease. Now, though, dusk settles, and my gaze drifts involuntarily ceilingward, straining for that telltale sound. A disquiet coils within me whenever my eyes land on the attic hatch squatting in the upstairs hallway ceiling. It all began, improbably, with a balloon. I'm 33. My wife, Clara, and I, took this place, a weathered 2-story structure pinched by a narrow drive, because the square footage was ample and the rent mercifully low. Its facade bears the scars of time, paint flaking from the porch like sunburnt skin, shingles curled and aged upon the roof. Inside, the hardwood floors cry out in random protest beneath our feet, and door frames sag, warped by seasons past. And then there's that small, unassuming portal in the hall ceiling, concealing a pull-down ladder to the attic. Until a week ago, it held no allure, a cramped, dust-choked space I had no desire to explore. Holiday decorations might find a home there eventually, I'd reasoned, but unpacking the life we'd brought with us took precedence. Clara is the pragmatist, the orchestrator of order. Repairs are tackled promptly, belongings marshaled into place, yet she respects my aversion to burrowing into cobwebbed crawl spaces, never pressing me to investigate the attic. We left it undisturbed, an unclaimed territory. Our sanctuary became the large room downstairs. The designated master bedroom upstairs harbored a peculiar staleness, not rot exactly, but an unplaceable, stagnant odor, perhaps lingering adhesive from forgotten wallpaper, perhaps mildew woven into the very plaster. Whatever its origin, the downstairs air felt cleaner, the space more welcoming. That first weekend, we hosted a small celebratory meal, inviting my parents to inspect our new domain. Clara had procured a small festive helium balloon, emblazoned with "Congrats," tethering it to a dining chair, a whimsical touch. Days later, long after plates were cleared and parents departed, the balloon still hovered gamely near the ceiling. Clara laughed, remarking on the surprising tenacity of helium, before untying the ribbon and setting it adrift in the hallway. She found a certain charm in watching it nudge the plaster as we passed. So, the balloon became a silent, drifting companion in the corridor. Sometimes it loitered near the bathroom door. Other times, it migrated towards our bedroom entrance. No ceiling fans stir the air there, and the windows remain shut against the chill night air. But balloons wander, don't they? Subtle shifts in pressure, invisible currents, perfectly normal. I assigned it no significance. Then came the first tremor of wrongness. A Monday morning, waking before the sun. Routine ablutions complete, I stepped into the hall. The balloon was gone. A cursory scan of the living room, the kitchen, nothing. Not tucked in our bedroom, nor secreted in the downstairs closet. I shrugged. Deflated somewhere, perhaps snagged beneath furniture. Time was short. Work beckoned. I let it go. Evening descended, and with it, the rush to prepare dinner. The missing balloon slipped my mind until later, when I carried a box of sundries upstairs towards the spare room. Reaching the upper landing, I saw the attic hatch. I paused, a prickle of something undefinable running beneath my skin. As I turned away, my eyes caught movement in the narrow gap between the hatch and its frame. I'd never opened it, yet visible near the top of the retracted ladder was the faint, unmistakable curve of something round. I froze, staring. My heart gave a sudden, hard thump. Superstition has never been my crutch, but the physics felt impossible. How could a helium balloon navigate its way into a sealed attic? Retrieving a flashlight from the spare room, I tugged the cord. The hatch groaned open, the foldable ladder unfolding like skeletal fingers. I ascended slowly into the gloom. There, suspended in the center of the dusty, stagnant expanse, bobbed the balloon. The air hung thick with the scent of decaying cardboard and time itself. Spiderwebs draped the corners like macabre bunting. Rough-hewn beams crisscrossed overhead, forcing me into a crouch. The floor beneath my feet was mere plywood laid across the joists. No draft stirred the air, no window offered entry. The balloon, still plump with helium, swayed gently in the absolute stillness. The only illumination came from the weak bulb near the entrance, which I'd flicked on. No other egress, no vents, nothing. I stood there, adrift in confusion, for what felt like a long minute. Finally, my hand reached out, closing around the thin string. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Had Clara put it there? A bizarre, elaborate, practical joke? It seemed the only possibility, however outlandish. I carefully guided the balloon back down into the hallway's familiar light and called for her. She was in the kitchen, wrestling with grocery bags. "Did you go up in the attic?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Her look was one of pure incomprehension. "No," she said, adding, "Why on earth would I go into that dusty pit?" I believed her. She dislikes that space as much as I do. Besides, she'd been occupied all afternoon. I'd been at work. She insisted she hadn't touched the balloon. An unease settled deep in my gut, though I attempted a strained laugh. "Maybe a freak draft," I suggested, knowing even as I spoke that the attic door had remained firmly shut. We settled onto the sofa, the television flickering, the balloon relegated to a corner of the living room. I wanted it out of sight. Sleep came, initially untroubled, but around 3 a.m, I snapped awake. A sound from above, soft footfalls, just a few light thuds, hesitant, then silence. 20 seconds later, a few more. I lay rigid, breathing shallowly. Clara slept peacefully beside me, oblivious. The sounds, unmistakably like someone pacing, persisted for perhaps a minute before ceasing altogether. My heart raced, my throat felt like sandpaper. I tried to rationalize, settling timbers, old plumbing groaning to life. But the cadence was too deliberate, too human. Courage failed me. I didn't investigate. I remained awake, eyes wide in the darkness, listening until dawn crept through the curtains. Morning found me taut with anxiety. I recounted the sounds to Clara. She reminded me that old houses breathe, they shift, especially with temperature fluctuations. Sensible advice. "Call the landlord if it happens again," she suggested. I agreed, yet the image of the balloon in the attic superimposed itself onto the memory of the footsteps. 2 nights later, it returned. Around the same hour, the same light, furtive pacing overhead. This time, a surge of adrenaline propelled me from bed. I crept into the hallway, tilting my head back, staring up at the dark rectangle of the attic hatch. Silence reigned. Clara emerged, blinking sleepily. "What are you doing?" I whispered about the noise. She listened intently for a moment, heard nothing, then gently suggested I was letting the balloon incident spook me. "Come back to bed," she murmured. The following evening, resolve hardened within me. I had to look again, search for a loose floorboard, signs of squirrels, raccoons, anything tangible. Clara was engrossed in a book downstairs. I preferred to face this alone, lest my paranoia prove baseless. Flashlight in hand once more, I ascended the creaking ladder, pushing my head into the thick, stale air. The single bulb cast weak circles of light. Dust motes danced in the beam. Discarded boxes from tenants past slumped in corners. Dead insects littered the floor. Initially, nothing seemed amiss. Then, near a rough wooden beam, I saw it. I moved closer, stepping carefully on the precarious plywood. A wave of nausea washed over me. The balloon. It was back. But this time, it wasn't merely floating, it was tied. The string was looped securely around a rusty piece of wire protruding from the beam, deliberately knotted. There was just enough slack for it to sway slightly, tethered in place. Disbelief held me captive. A profound chill radiated through my limbs, raising gooseflesh despite the stuffy air. My breath hitched. I glanced back towards the hatch. Empty. Clara was downstairs. We had no roommates. Words failed me, lodging somewhere in my constricted throat. Who? Why? The questions screamed silently in my mind. Forcing my legs to move, I approached the tethered balloon. I grasped the string, tugging at the knot twisted tightly around the wire. It wouldn't yield. Someone had meticulously secured it. Frustration mounting, I yanked harder until the string snapped. The balloon bobbed beside me, an absurdly cheerful object in this grim space. Could the wire have snagged it accidentally as it drifted? The precision required seemed astronomical. The knot felt intentional. I retreated from the attic as quickly as safety allowed, heart hammering. Back in the hallway, I slammed the hatch shut. My breathing came in ragged gasps, sweat cooling on my forehead. Clara appeared from the living room. "Why do you have that again?" she asked, seeing the balloon clutched in my trembling hand. I stared at her, searching her eyes for any flicker of deceit. She swore she hadn't moved it, hadn't been near the attic. Her sincerity was undeniable. Clara doesn't play games like this. Without another word, we disposed of it. Scissors flashed, the balloon sighed its last breath, and I threw the deflated plastic into the bin. Finished, done. Or so I hoped. That night, the footsteps resumed. Lying rigid in bed, I heard them overhead. Light, almost cautious, pacing back and forth. A minute, maybe two. I slipped out of bed again, standing sentinel in the hallway, eyes fixed on the attic door. My heart felt dangerously loud, a frantic drum against my ribs. Palms slick with sweat. Then, silence fell, once more. The urge to fling open the hatch warred with a paralyzing fear. What if someone was up there, living secretly in the rafters? The thought sent tremors through my knees. Calling the police felt premature, ridiculous. Footsteps in my attic, officer, but no proof. We were new here. I resisted escalating things based on sounds and a rogue balloon. Daylight brought a renewed, albeit anxious, determination. I scoured the attic again, shifted the few derelict boxes, probed corners, searching for animal signs, a hidden panel, anything. Dust, cobwebs, and one old trunk with a broken latch. I lifted the lid. Inside lay only moth-eaten scraps of fabric and a cardboard folder, brittle with age, containing yellowed receipts. No footprints, no droppings, no unexpected openings, no evidence of occupancy. For several days, I maintained a facade of normalcy. Work, dinner, mundane conversations with Clara about groceries and errands. But darkness transformed me into a creature of pure vigilance. Every settling creak, every gurgle of the pipes became magnified, scrutinized. The familiar house sounds were distinct from those footsteps. The measured cadence, step, 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 pause, step, step, step. I tried recording it once. Woken around 3 a.m. by the familiar rhythm, I fumbled for my phone, hit record, crept into the hall, only for the sounds to cease instantly. The recording captured only my own ragged breathing and the distant drone of the refrigerator. Our landlord, a man seemingly allergic to urgency, offered little solace. Old house, quirks expected, he'd mumbled over the phone. Attic ventilation was minimal, screened off near the roofline, supposedly secure against pests. Any evidence of rodents? No, I admitted. Well, let me know if you find anything, he'd concluded, effectively ending the conversation. Now, each evening involves a ritualistic check of the attic hatch. Always closed. Sometimes I stand beneath it, flashlight beam tracing the edges, hunting for anomalies. Nothing. Clara thinks I'm obsessing, letting it burrow too deep. Perhaps she's right. But last night the footsteps were undeniable, sharp and clear. I pressed my hand flat against the ceiling plaster and felt the faint vibration. And there's the trunk. I distinctly remember closing it firmly after my inspection. Yet yesterday, venturing back up for another fruitless search, I found it wide open, lid pushed back on its hinges. The fabric scraps and receipts inside look disturbed, shuffled. I am not imagining this. I know what I closed, and I know what I found. My rational mind scrambles for purchase, a loose mechanical component in the roof structure, vibrating rhythmically. But the balloon... Twice it migrated to the attic. The second time, it was tied to that wire. Pipes and vibrating machinery don't tie knots. The balloon is gone, but its spectral presence lingers in the memory, entwined with the persistent footsteps and the inexplicably open trunk. Clara sleeps through the worst of it, the sounds often ceasing when she stirs. My experience remains solitary, isolating. I've taken a small measure of control. A simple padlock now secures the attic hatch, the latch screwed firmly into the frame. Overkill, possibly, but the sight of that small metal lock offers a sliver of psychological defense. If something, or someone, attempts descent, surely the struggle would be audible. Yet the footsteps haven't stopped. 2 nights ago, they echoed again. The lock makes it worse somehow. If someone is trapped up there, how do the sounds continue? Unless there's another way out, hidden from me. Or unless it isn't someone. Clara, seeing my fraying nerves, suggested a professional home inspection, focusing on the attic and roof. I intend to arrange it. Perhaps they'll uncover a hidden vent, an animal intrusion, a logical source. If they find nothing, I don't know. The image reel plays relentlessly in my mind. The balloon floating serenely in the forbidden space. The balloon tethered by an unknown hand. The sick dread blooming in my chest as I stood beneath it. Our short-term lease feels increasingly like a countdown to escape. The cheap rent is poor compensation for this gnawing anxiety. Clara, though less affected, sees the toll it's taking. The sleeplessness, the perpetual knot in my stomach. Lying awake, listening so intently that every benign creak makes me flinch. Who carried that balloon upstairs? Why place it dead center? Why tie it to a wire? Why is the trunk disturbed? The questions echo unanswered. All I know is the footsteps persist, a soft, rhythmic haunting. A professional inspection might reveal a mundane explanation, a structural quirk, a hidden entry point. I cling to that hope. Until then, each night finds me staring at the ceiling, waiting, exhausted but unable to rest, caught between the fear of a hidden human presence and the chilling possibility of something else entirely. This house, meant to be a beginning, has become a place where I lie awake, straining to decipher footsteps that may belong to no one I can see or comprehend. That corridor, its shadow stretched back further than memory, even from the first viewing. An instinct, primal and sharp, should have screamed caution the instant my foot crossed the threshold into its gloom. The rent for a 3-bedroom slice of San Francisco Victoriana was laughably low, a siren song for the desperate, and desperation, I find, is a potent silencer of alarms. 3 months dissolve, and here I sit, bathed in the flickering neon pulse of a motel sign, the keyboard cool beneath trembling fingers. That house remains an undigested lump of dread. This telling is an attempt to map the poison. It began under the pale September sky, a listing shimmering on a screen like digital fool's gold. The geography was perfect. A stroll from the gleaming towers of my new tech existence, the cost, divided, became feasible. Through the ether of housing forums, I found Leo and Reese. We resonated, a shared language of code and ambition. Leo, a kinetic UI designer with calloused hands from scaling rock faces. Reese, a back-end architect whose nights thrummed with the bass lines of his local band. Normalcy seemed their default setting. Mrs. Petrov, the proprietor, emerged from the city's sprawl, an elderly woman holding keys to the past. She guided us through the 1924 relic one sun-drenched afternoon. Time had etched its presence, wallpaper curling like ancient parchment, floorboards groaning underfoot, the ubiquitous scent of trapped decades. Yet character resided there, in the soaring ceilings and the patina of original hardwood. A simple design, communal spaces below, 3 bed chambers above, tethered by that long arterial hallway culminating in a shared bath. That hallway, even bathed in the afternoon's generosity, it clung to its shadows. Mrs. Petrov engaged the overhead fixture. A single bulb offered a weak, jaundiced glow that surrendered mere feet from its source. A failing bulb, I reasoned. Good people, the last ones, she murmured as ink dried on the lease. 2 years they stayed, left quick. Work, you understand? A flicker of hesitation. Old houses, they have voices, settling, nothing more. The following weekend saw us transplant our lives. Leo claimed the room nearest the stairs, Reese the central chamber, leaving me, Elias, the final berth beside the bathroom at the corridor's terminus. Weeks unfolded in the rhythm of new routines. Sunlight, bold and invasive, conquered every room but one. Regardless of hour or weather, the hallway remained a zone of perpetual twilight, unnaturally dim. I swapped the bulb for a potent LED, a futile gesture. The light seemed hesitant, absorbed by an unseen density, faltering as if encountering resistance. Tricks of architecture, I told myself. Peculiar angles casting long shadows, perhaps dark paint beneath the paper swallowing the lumens. The first fissure in normalcy appeared a month hence. I was returning late, the city humming its 11 p.m. tune. Leo was elsewhere, entangled with his girlfriend. Reese, lost in sonic landscapes with his band. Ascending the stairs, traversing the passage toward my room, I heard it. A susurration, delicate as moth wings against the ear. Here! I froze, a statue carved from sudden ice. The sound originated from behind, yet the corridor stretched empty, swallowing the weak light. Imagination, I insisted. Fatigue's phantom limb. I hastened my steps, the click of my door latch a small punctuation mark against the silence. In the ensuing weeks, it returned, always nocturnal, always in solitude. Sometimes formless whispers, a sibilant murmuring just below comprehension. Other times, fractured words surfaced like debris. Stay. Eyes. Near. A strategic avoidance began. I'd linger downstairs, feigning tasks, until Leo or Reese returned, merging my ascent with theirs. The whispers were selective, shy of company. Had they heard anomalies? I ventured the question. Nah, man, Leo mumbled, eyes glued to his glowing rectangle. Standard old house groans. Corridors weirdly dark, though. Reese added, been meaning to rig more lights. We installed sconces, flanking the passage. They flared briefly, then submitted, their radiance similarly consumed, creating isolated islands in an ocean of shadow. I became an archivist of the unseen. My phone, set to record in the vacant hallway during work hours, captured only immaculate silence. Photographs revealed nothing but a dimly lit, unremarkable passage. The whispers, however, shed their timidity, growing insistent, louder. One December night, the clock nearing 3, I journeyed towards the bathroom. Passing Reese's door, a voice, sharp and clear, sliced the silence. Curiosity calls, doesn't it? I pivoted, heart slamming against ribs. The hallway seemed to have inhaled the light. The fixtures burned like distant, dying stars. The darkness between them felt viscous, almost solid. I perceived movement within it, subtle ripples disturbing a surface of black water. Hello? My voice, a fragile thing. Is anyone there? Only silence answered. Then, intimately close, directly behind me, a collective sigh, laden with patience. You were expected. Flight, pure adrenal instinct. My bedroom door slammed, the desk chair wedged beneath the handle, a flimsy barricade. The remainder of the night passed under the glare of every lamp, each creak of the old house a potential intrusion. Dawn painted the world in normalcy. Leo and Reese were in the kitchen, dissecting weekend possibilities, oblivious. Research became my refuge. Dusty municipal archives and brittle newspaper stacks yielded the house's genesis, built in 1924 by one Anatoly Volkov, a merchant of his time. He and his wife resided there until his passing in 1947. Ownership transferred multiple times thereafter. The records remained stubbornly mundane. No documented deaths, no foul play, no unsettling disappearances. I unearthed Mrs. Petrov's number. The previous tenants, I began, the question hanging heavy. Their real reason for leaving? A weighted silence stretched across the line. They found the house unsuitable. Did they mention the corridor, hearing things? Another pause. Old structures settle, sounds carry, wind, pipes. It is normal. Mrs. Petrov, please, was there anything unusual? A sigh, weary. They spoke of the darkness in the passage, of sounds, but sounds are everywhere in old places, expected things. And others, before them? I must conclude this call, she stated, her tone shifting to brisk formality. Remember the terms of your lease. Early termination carries penalties. My room became a fortress, the door locked, a white noise machine humming defiance against the silence. Nocturnal bathroom trips involved exiting the house, circling around, using the downstairs facilities. A ridiculous, chilling detour, but the corridor was unavoidable. My room, my work, my life resided beyond its threshold. The whispering shifted its tactic, becoming conversational, insidious. We sense you. Why the silence? Converse. This is your place now. Other strangenesses bled into perception. The umbra in the corridor seemed animate at times, shifting, flowing like languid smoke. Abrupt temperature drops occurred mid-stride, my breath misting in invisible cold spots. Objects within my room suffered subtle displacements. A book angled differently, a pen shifted, just enough to sow seeds of self-doubt, to make me question the integrity of my own mind. An electronic eye was placed sentinel, a motion-activated camera aimed down the hallway's throat. The first night, it recorded faithfully until 3:15 a.m. and then blackness, absolute void for precisely 6 minutes. Then, normalcy restored. This pattern repeated for 3 consecutive nights. I presented the footage over breakfast. Dude, power dip, Leo offered, dismissive. Old wiring does crazy stuff. It's battery powered, I countered. Nothing else lost power. Reese shifted, visibly uncomfortable. Look, Elias, the hallway's creepy. Yeah, but maybe you're focusing too much. Might be good to talk to someone. Their disbelief was a wall thicker than the house's ancient plaster. Of course, they were deaf to the whispers, blind to the shifting dark. The insidious question began to bloom. Was I unraveling? Last night shattered the fragile truce. Engulfed in work, headphones sealing me in a bubble of sound near midnight. A sudden draft raised the hairs on my neck. I turned. My door stood ajar. I distinctly remembered closing it. Beyond lay the corridor, plunged into a blackness deeper than any night. Absolute negation. The lights, though technically on, were reduced to feeble pinpricks, distant stars failing to penetrate the oppressive void. Then, movement. The darkness was no longer merely flowing. It was reaching, unfurling tendrils of shadow, questing into the sanctuary of my room. And at its heart, I perceived something, a concentration of the void, an anthropomorphic emptiness, a silhouette carved from absence itself. Featureless, yet I felt its gaze. The whispers erupted, no longer localized but omnipresent, a psychic cacophony. At last, become one. Your time. Eternity awaits. Backpack stuffed with laptop and phone, I fled. Down the stairs, out the door, into the car. The engine's roar felt like a frail shield against the profound silence I'd left behind. This sterile motel room is a temporary shore. Digital reassurances were exchanged with Leo this morning. Where are you? Doors locked. No answer. I offered vague excuses about personal days. His reply sent a fresh chill down my spine. Weird thing, Elias. Corridor seems less oppressive today. Brighter. Reese sees it too. No return. That threshold is closed forever. The lease, a problem for another day. Perhaps I courted madness. Perhaps a prosaic explanation underlies every strangeness, But the presence in that hallway, it was sentient, aware, expectant. It remains there, I am certain, whispering into the gloom, waiting for receptive ears. The internet offers fragmented echoes, tales of sentient shadows, parasitic darkness, places where the veil between worlds wears thin, interdimensional bleed-through, psychic residue, thin spots. I lack the desire for nomenclature. This account serves as a flare, launched from the edge of understanding. A warning. Should you wander San Francisco streets and discover an impossible bargain, a Victorian jewel with a heart of shadow, keep walking. A rapping at the door just now, the motel attendant. A noise complaint, she explains, apologetically. Someone reported disturbing whispers emanating from my room, but I have been utterly, completely alone in here. The silence presses in, heavy and watchful. I need to leave this place too, now. This isn't about the miles logged or the chrome gleam. It's about the road itself. One particular stretch, and the night it swallowed me whole. Years I've ridden, preferring the engine's thrum to conversation, the solitude of asphalt ribbons unwinding under moon or stars. But that preference offered no shield against what waited on that forgotten highway. The witching hour bled towards 3. Hours had dissolved behind me on tarmac I'd never known to host another soul, even under the indifferent sun. Then the cold bit, a toothless grip first on my neck, then arms. Stillness reigned. No breeze stirred the absolute quiet. My headlamp punched a solitary tunnel through miles of ink. No house glow, no flicker of a distant gas sign. Civilization felt like a rumor an hour dead. Ahead, it loomed, a cataract of vapor, stark white against the night, unnaturally abrupt. Instinct throttled me back. Plunging in felt like drowning upright. Instantly, the air grew teeth of moisture, gnawing at my leathers, beading like alien sweat on my visor. High beams were useless, flaring back, blinding. Low beams surrendered after mere feet. Beneath my tires, the asphalt turned slick, treacherous. A knot formed low in my gut. Not the usual caution fog demands. This felt dense, wrong. A suffocating uniform gray bled into everything, erasing the world. A sudden cough from the engine, a tremor vibrating up through the handlebars. Water in the wires, I reasoned, a minor gremlin. But the cough became a stutter, a death rattle from a machine I knew like my own heartbeat. Reliable for years, now faltering. Gauges offered no answers, just steady needle mocking the engine's ragged gasps. Then silence, utter mechanical death. The console lights blinked out, plunging me into an even deeper blindness. That's when the cold wasn't just the night air. Raw fear, sharp and metallic, flooded my throat. Ignition, a futile click, a pathetic whir. Nothing. My own pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my skull. Kickstand down, swing a leg over, boots meeting the weeping tarmac with a soft slap. A deeper cold, unrelated to temperature, snaked up my spine. Wait for dawn. The thought soured. This fog felt sentient, pressing, heavy as a shroud. I had to move. Heaving the bike's dead weight toward the shoulder, the mist closed in, a tangible presence. My vision shrank to an arm's length. Each exhale plumed white, loud in the oppressive hush. Bike parked, ignition cycled off, then on again. A flicker of hope on the dash, instantly extinguished. The engine remained inert. Then behind me, a scuff, soft, dragging. like a boot sole reluctant to leave the pavement. I whirled, eyes straining into the featureless grey. Shapes swam, resolved into nothing. My heart leaped. "Hello?" The word died, swallowed by the fog. "Anyone there?" Only an echo, faint and distorted, returned, and beneath it, a susurrus, too low to decipher, like dry leaves skittering. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms despite the sweat forming under my jacket. Animal? Maybe. But the cadence felt unnervingly bipedal. My fingers fumbled, found the cold cylinder of the flashlight. Click. Its beam sliced a weak wedge into the murk, illuminating nothing but swirling vapor a few paces away. Useless. That dragging shuffle returned, seeming to orbit me now, always just beyond the light's feeble reach. "Who's out there?" I yelled, voice tight. Silence answered, thick and mocking. Then another shuffle, closer this time, accompanied by a whisper that seemed to curl around my head from behind. I spun again, empty grey. A band tightened around my chest, stealing breath. Short, sharp gasps replaced steady respiration. Run? Abandon the bike? The last town felt like another lifetime ago, 30 miles swallowed by night. My watch face glowed. 3:14 a.m. Dawn was a distant, fragile promise. Decision made. Push. Walk the dead machine until... Until what? Safety felt mythical here. Gripping the bars, I leaned in, boots finding purchase on the uneven, slick road. Slow progress. The fog seemed to retaliate, thickening, pressing closer, turning my flashlight's beam back on itself in a blinding glare. Now more footsteps. Plural, it seemed. Skittering, sometimes distant, sometimes near, and murmuring, a low tide of unintelligible whispers rising and falling. Every nerve screamed. Perhaps 10 minutes wrestled from the fog. Then, a flicker. The bike's headlamp spasmed, a half-second of weak light. Hope surged. Ignition again. Dead. The flicker died. A ragged sigh escaped me. Keep pushing. Ahead, a slightly less opaque patch beckoned. A hint of lighter grey to the side. A clearing? I steered the bike towards it, muscles burning, boots sliding on the wet grit. Reaching it, I saw a small shoulder of gravel. I parked the machine, leaning on it, gasping. The fog eddied around this small island of relative clarity, a theater curtain waiting to rise. Then, movement. Left periphery. A tallish, indistinct silhouette, utterly still. Flashlight beam, stabbed. Nothing. Just mist. I blinked, squeezed my eyes shut, opened them. Light off. On again. Still nothing. Throat parchment dry. A wet, heavy breath sounded directly behind me, close enough to feel the displaced air. I spun, flashlight sweeping. Empty space. I paced the small gravel patch, a trapped animal, eyes darting. The breathing swelled, loud, intimate, then abruptly ceased. My heart hammered against my ribs. A high whine started in my ears. Every muscle knotted. The nape of my neck prickled. Watched. Undeniably watched. Forward again. No choice but forward. The fog answered my resolve by descending anew, thicker, swirling, trying to erase the road itself. I swiped uselessly at my visor with a rag. The dampness returned instantly. Humidity choked the air, sweat beaded on my brow, despite a palpable drop in temperature that made each breath sear my throat. My legs felt like lead posts. Keep moving. Glimpses teased the edges of vision, something pale flitting past where the light died. Once, a face, distorted, skull-like beneath stretched parchment skin, mouth a silent O of horror. Gone in a blink, consumed by the grey. My chest constricted again, breath hitched, tremors started in my hands. Exhaustion? Hallucination? No. The certainty of other, settled deep and cold. A wet, dragging scrape erupted to my right, lasted seconds, stopped, then mirrored to my left. Closer. The hairs on my neck stiffened. Nausea churned. Ignore it. Push. The sound played games, advancing, retreating, swapping sides, a predator testing defenses. My knuckles turned white on the handlebars. Distance gained felt meaningless. Time had become elastic, minutes stretching into stagnant eternities, mocked by the slow crawl of my watch hands. Another pocket of thinner mist revealed a jagged crack across the asphalt, filled with rainwater. My flashlight's beam reflected weakly from the surface, and in that murky mirror, a figure, standing beside me, reflected yet unseen beside the puddle. I whipped around, light slashing, empty road, back to the puddle. The reflection was empty too. My ribcage felt ready to burst. The auditory assault intensified. Whispers sharpened, occasionally coalescing into what sounded like a venomous, hushed argument, then dissolving into low, sorrowful moans. Step followed painful step. Boot soles squeaked on wet pavement. My jacket hung heavy, sodden. Breath fogged the visor. I flipped it up, welcoming the cold shock of air. A glance down the road. Another flash image. A face contorted in agony. Eyes mere sockets of shadow. Mouth a gaping rictus. Light beam lunged. Gone. Violent shudders racked my body. Curses tumbled out. Whispers lost in the vast, indifferent grey. Run! The instinct screamed. Flee! Leave the useless machine. But where? No signal, confirmed earlier. The phone screen, a blank dismissal. Forward into the unknown. Or back into... what? The thought of turning back brought a paralysis. A physical resistance, as if the fog behind had solidified, pressing against me. Forward it was. The imperative to escape this grey purgatory overrode exhaustion, pain. Boots splashed through unseen puddles, soaking my jeans. Water dripped from my jacket sleeves. My arms were leaden weights, my back a knot of fire, but I pushed. Ahead, to the right, a glimmer, not my failing torch, but a weak, jaundiced glow. Hope flared, fragile. I edged closer, straining. It flickered, winked out, a mirage of the mist. Then, from that precise spot, a loud, clumsy shuffle. I froze, light stabbing forward. Only swirling grey answered, pulse frantic, palms slick, breath tearing in and out. Just passing through, I rasped, the words absurdly loud. No trouble. The murmurs continued, indifferent, distant. A few more steps. Peripheral flicker, something tall. A roadside tree? Flashlight swept the verge. No trees, just the fog, coiling, uncoiling, forming ephemeral shapes. One coalesced briefly into a featureless head before dissolving back into the vapor. My eyes burned from the strain. Bile rose. A tremor started in my leg. A hollow ache bloomed in my chest. Throat tight. One last, desperate try. Key in. Turn. Console lights flared and died. Frustration boiled over. I kicked the pedal hard, the metallic clang echoing unnaturally. The whispers ceased for a beat as if listening, then resumed, faster, more insistent. Watch check. 4 4:00 an hour trapped in this hell. Or an eternity. Push. Numb arms, screaming back. Push. The footsteps shadowed me again, keeping pace just beyond sight. My flashlight beam weakened further, sputtering. I tapped it. A feeble flicker. My stomach plummeted, losing the light now. A jarring lurch. My front wheel hit a pothole hidden by the gloom. The bike bucked. I wrestled it upright, but my foot twisted violently beneath me. White-hot agony shot up my leg. A choked curse. I had to stop. Kickstand down, leaning heavily against the cold metal, breath sawing in my throat. The ankle throbbed obscenely. Every muscle screamed tension. The fog felt like a physical weight, suffocating, isolating. A low groan emanated from the mist to my left, guttural and close. Movement, glimpsed, head snapped around. Nothing but the grey wall. My own harsh breathing filled the silence. Every nerve ending prickled. A shape seemed to detach itself from the murk, gliding closer, darker than the surrounding fog. I thrust the dying flashlight like a weapon. "Stay back!" My voice cracked. A sound answered. Soft, sibilant, a dry hiss that locked my jaw. The shape seemed to hesitate, then recede slowly back into the swirling grey. Survival instinct screamed louder than the pain. Gripping the bars, I lurched forward, dragging my injured leg, pushing. Each step was fire. Sweat blinded me, mingling with the mist. Breath shallow. Just get through. The road bent sharply. I followed its curve, limping, shoving. And then, release. The oppressive weight lessened. The fog began to shred, revealing the skeletal outlines of trees flanking the road. Visibility stretched, 10, 20, 50 feet. My flashlight beam suddenly seemed potent again. Hope surged, lending strength. I pushed faster, ignoring the screaming ankle. The bike felt almost buoyant. The menacing shapes dissolved. The whispers died away. Suddenly, I was in a comparatively clear patch, able to see perhaps 100 feet ahead. Above, the blackness seemed less absolute, tinged with the faintest grey promise of dawn. One more time. Key. Ignition. A hesitant cough, then a bellowing roar as the engine caught, vibrated back to life beneath me. A strangled laugh escaped my lips. I swung my good leg over, ignoring the fire in my ankle, twisting the throttle. The engine sputtered, caught, held. Behind me, the fog bank churned. A solid wall clinging to the road, thick and malevolent. Throttle wide open, the bike leaped forward, no looking back, head pounding, eyes streaming from the wind and relief, focused only on the unfolding ribbon of road, escaping the grey maw. Minutes bled into miles. The sky softened perceptibly towards dawn. The road ahead lay clear and blessedly empty. Just once, a quick glance over my shoulder. It was still there, a dense, unnatural mass brooding over the asphalt, miles back, starkly defined against the lightening horizon. Unmoving. Eyes forward. Distance. That was the only goal. My heart still hammered a frantic beat against my ribs. An arm trembled uncontrollably on the handlebar, but I rode on. What lurked within that suffocating grey? I have no name for it, no tidy theory. The faces remained indistinct, nightmare glimpses, but the sounds, the scraping steps, the insidious whispers, the hiss, those were undeniably real, as was the palpable hostility, the sense of being an unwelcome intrusion in a place that belonged to something else. Luck, timing, something else entirely that allowed me to break free? I'll never know. Nor will I ever seek to find out by returning to that haunted stretch of road. This is the shape of it, the raw memory stripped bare. Sometimes, in the quiet, I still hear the drag of a footstep on wet pavement, feel the cold dread bloom anew in my gut. I seek no validation, only to unburden the telling. But heed this, should you find yourself on a lonely road before dawn, faced with a fog bank that feels too sudden, too solid, perhaps consider another route. I know I will. The old building sighed around me, a nocturnal symphony of skeletal groans and settling timbers I was learning to conduct in my mind. Surely nothing more than plumbing's lament or drafts whistling through ancient fissures. Solitude, however, possesses a unique acoustic. In the profound quietude following the city's exhale, every whisper of the structure amplified into a shout. Acclamation, I assured myself, merely the price of residency. Scarcely a week had passed since the twin lures of a forgotten street corner's charm and scandalously low rent had drawn me here. This eyrie, perched atop 4 weathered stories, was modest, a solitary bedroom clinging to existence beneath the eaves. Yet it possessed a certain dilapidated grandeur, ceilings vaulting towards unseen heights, broad windows framing the indifferent night, and floors of venerable hardwood that sang out, creaking with every passage. That particular night, the television's flickering ghost had kept me company late into the hours, a futile attempt to unravel the day's accumulated knots. Eventually, the screen went dark. The familiar rituals of toothpaste and dimmed lights performed almost automatically. 1 o'clock tolled somewhere distant. Weariness washed over me then, a sudden, welcome tide pulling me under the sheets. Darkness claimed my eyes, the apartment's pervasive hush a supposed cradle for sleep. Then, a subtle dissonance threaded through the quiet. At first, I dismissed it as a phantom of encroaching slumber, the faintest cadence, like footfalls descending from above. Impossible. Mine was the summit apartment. The rafters, the roof itself, then only sky, were my upstairs neighbors. The building breathing, perhaps? Ancient structures possess their own nocturnal rhythms, their private dialogues with time. I willed the sound away, burrowing deeper into the bedding. Yet it persisted, grew defined. A measured tread, slow, deliberate, traversing the unseen void directly over my head, pacing methodically from one wall clear to the other, right above my ceiling. A frantic pulse leaped against my ribs. My eyes snapped open, fixed on the impenetrable dark above. This was no dream's echo, no figment of fatigue. Real, tangible sound. Someone, something, occupied the space just beyond the plaster. I pushed myself upright in bed, mind scrambling, grasping for logic. An attic? None I'd been told of, none mentioned, yet the rhythm was undeniable. The distinct pressure and release of steps, pacing with an unnerving deliberation, as if meticulously mapping the unseen territory. My bare feet found the cold floorboards, heart a frantic drum against the silence. Reason offered flimsy shields, forgotten storage, a trapped creature somehow finding ingress, standing there cloaked in shadow, listening intently to that heavy, rhythmic march. Neither explanation felt adequate. Neither could quell the rising tide of unease. My phone's beam sliced the darkness as I edged cautiously into the hallway, a trembling blade of light probing the oppressive gloom. Directly overhead, the perambulation continued, steady, unhurried, oblivious. I remained frozen, a statue carved from burgeoning fear, needing to act, yet rooted by a profound reluctance to confront the source. My limbs felt like anchors. Ignorance suddenly seemed infinitely safer than discovery. Abruptly, it ceased. Utter stillness descended, thick and absolute, pressing in on me. I held my breath, ears straining against the sudden vacuum. Nothing. The apartment reverted instantly to its inert quiet, as if the phantom walker had simply dissolved into the ether. Breathe. Overwrought nerves, I chided myself fiercely. The building's eccentricities, magnified by solitude. Perhaps a waking dream, the mind's treacherous mischief. Retreating to the relative safety of my bed offered little true solace. Sleep remained elusive, lurking just beyond the edge of a newly sharpened apprehension. Daylight chased the immediacy of the memory, almost burying it beneath the comforting weight of routine. But returning that evening, crossing the threshold once more, an undeniable wrongness permeated the air. A scent, subtle yet pervasive, cloying, stagnant, the unmistakable aroma of slow decay, of something organic left untended. A frantic check of the kitchen, the bin, nothing amiss. The source, bafflingly, seemed to emanate from above, a phantom miasma clinging inexplicably to the ceiling itself. The evening hours crawled by under a pall of nervous anticipation, my gaze drawn involuntarily, ceilingward time and again. The night deepened, silent, almost lulling me back towards a fragile disbelief, until 2 a.m. shattered the calm with brutal finality. Again, the tread. That same deliberate, heavy rhythm resonated from overhead, pacing its invisible confines, but amplified now, insistent, freighted with undeniable presence. It felt less like a random haunting, more like a purposeful declaration. A cold prickle traced the length of my spine. My phone, clutched like a talisman in my hand, offered no answers, only uncertain options. Contact the building's caretaker? The word sounded ludicrous, even forming in my thoughts. There's someone promenading inside my ceiling. The authorities? For what? Errant fauna? A mysteriously creaking joist? Before any decision could solidify into action, the pacing halted once more, positioning itself precisely above my bed. Then, a new horror unfolded. A sickening thump. A single, ponderous impact, heavy and final, as if a great weight had been unceremoniously dropped onto the floorboards just beyond the plaster. Immediately following this came a scraping, dragging sound, coarse, laborious, the unmistakable noise of something substantial being effortfully hauled across the floor above. My breath hitched, shallow and rapid in my throat. My heart hammered a desperate, panicked rhythm against my ribs. A primal urge to flee warred violently with the terrifying proximity of the unknown presence. Trapped, I lay rigid beneath the covers, a prisoner of visceral dread, listening as the dragging noise stretched into an unbearable eternity, before finally, gradually, fading into silence once more. Sleep was unthinkable now. I remained vigilant through the remaining darkness, eyes locked on the plaster expanse above, waiting, just waiting. Dawn brought a fragile, desperate courage. I reached out to the building's caretaker, relaying the night's terrifying events, inquiring again, more forcefully, about any conceivable space, attic, crawl space, anything, however unlikely, nestled above my unit. His surprise sounded genuine, laced perhaps with impatience, over the line. No such space existed, he asserted firmly. The roof sat directly atop my ceiling joists. Pipes, most likely, he offered again, the suggestion thinner than ever, unconvincing even to him. A vague promise was made to dispatch someone for a look, but the dismissal in his tone was palpable. My account was clearly filed away under hysterical tenant. Several subsequent days unfolded in deceptive quiet. The phantom tread remained absent, yet the sensation of being observed, a persistent, prickling awareness at the nape of my neck, never fully dissipated. Each return home was tainted by it, the inescapable feeling of sharing the space with an unseen, unwelcome occupant. And the odor lingered, that faint, corrupt sweetness, hinting persistently at something hidden, something slowly putrefying just beyond the veil of plaster and paint. Then came a night unlike the others, shattering the uneasy truce. Drifting on the precarious edge of sleep, a new sound emerged from the silence above. Not footsteps this time, but a delicate tap, tap, tapping. Faint initially, tentative, like hesitant fingertips, drumming softly against the plaster directly overhead. But it strengthened, grew insistent, found a disturbing rhythm, demanding attention, impossible to ignore. Leaping from bed, phone beam stabbing upwards like a weapon, my breath seized in my throat. There, stark against the flat white expanse, precisely where the tapping emanated, snaked a fine, dark fracture. A crack. It hadn't been there hours before. Of that I was terrifyingly certain. As I stared, transfixed in horror, the tapping persisted, relentless, and the fissure visibly widened. Hairline spider silk blossoming into a jagged rift, as though under steady, inexorable pressure from the hidden side. I recoiled, stumbling backward, heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird fighting its cage. The tapping ceased abruptly, but the wound in the ceiling remained, a dark, jagged accusation marring the surface. No hesitation now, no rationalization left. Key snatched from the table, flight purely instinctive, I burst from the apartment, leaving lights ablaze and the door gaping wide behind me into the shadowed hallway. Refuge was found miles away, on a friend's sofa, the night spent in a shivering, wordless silence too deep for explanation. The following day, another call to the caretaker, my voice strained but resolute, this time reporting the physical evidence, demanding investigation. Hours later, his return call confirmed the impossible. The maintenance man had inspected thoroughly. There was nothing. No access panel, no forgotten void, no space whatsoever between my ceiling and the building's roof. Solid structure throughout. I never crossed that threshold again. Whatever entity resided within those walls, whatever claimed dominion over the non-existent space above my rooms, I would not stay to meet it. The lease was broken, my departure swift and final. Even now, the nature of that presence remains a chilling enigma, a cold spot in my memory, a testament to the unsettling truth that some thresholds guard secrets best left undisturbed. Some places are profoundly, inexplicably, better left alone. Two weeks past it was, since the sepulchral visage of Malachi Vane took residence upon my living room wall, an heirloom unearthed from the attic's dusty oubliette, intended merely as a counterpoint, a whisper of antiquity against the clean lines of modern furniture. Little did I foresee it becoming the fulcrum upon which my sanity would teeter. I recall the day, sifting through forgotten legacies under the eaves of my parents' house. My mother, vague about its provenance, murmured of a distant kinsman, a name lost to the nearer branches of our tree. "Always been here," she'd offered, a shrug ghosting through generations. Leaving it entombed felt like a betrayal, It deserved light, air, a place of regard. I never imagined its gaze would become my nocturnal companion. Mine is a modest dwelling on the town's periphery, solitude my only housemate. The living space flows into the kitchen, a simple arrangement where the portrait now holds court, the first thing encountered upon entry. Malachi Vane stares out, features hewn with archaic severity, clad in the fabrics of a forgotten century. His eyes, dark pools, yet harbor an unnerving intensity, a silent, insistent declaration. Encased in heavy, intricately carved wood, the frame itself possesses a brooding weight. Hanging it required a robust anchor, a testament to its physical, and perhaps metaphysical, substance. Stepping back then, I'd felt a rightness, an odd sense of homecoming for the piece. For several days, an undisturbed rhythm persisted. Keys dropped on the kitchen counter after work, solitary dinners consumed before the television's flickering glow. The portrait remained a peripheral shape, occasionally snagging the corner of my vision, unremarkable. Until one evening, adrift in the late hours of a film. Midnight approached, fatigue frayed my edges. As I moved to extinguish the lights, an inexplicable compulsion halted me before the canvas. I looked up, into his eyes. A connection, sharp and sudden, like crossed wires sparking. My skin tightened, a field of tiny disturbances. Seconds ticked by under that scrutiny before I forced a dismissal. Imagination, fueled by shadows and solitude. The following night confirmed it wasn't merely fancy. Traversing the space between living room and kitchen, his gaze seemed to pivot. A distinct, undeniable sensation of being tracked. Glancing back over my shoulder revealed only painted stillness, yet the air itself felt charged, heavy with a cold, watchful presence. A clamminess bloomed on my forearms. A chill, insidious and slow, crept up my spine. Music, turned up loud, offered thin insulation against the rising tide of unease. My heart hammered a slightly quickened tattoo against my ribs. Not fear, precisely, but a taut alertness. A few evenings later, mid-preparation for dinner, a sound splintered the quiet. A creak, sharp and localized, emanating from the living room. Old houses sigh, floorboards settle. I knew this, but this sound carried a different timbre, the distinct punctuation of weight settling near the sofa. Stove silenced, spatula clutched like a rudimentary weapon. I stepped through the doorway, flicking on the overhead glare. Nothing amiss. The portrait hung, bathed in the softer pool cast by a side lamp. I strained my ears against the silence, seeking echoes, finding none. My skin felt stretched taut across my bones. Returning to the kitchen, my hunger had vanished, replaced by a metallic tang of anxiety. That same night, drawn by a morbid curiosity, I devoted myself to a closer study. Seated on the sofa, I angled the table lamp to illuminate the canvas directly. Time had etched its fine craquelure across the background pigments. Malachi's eyes possessed a varnished, lifelike sheen, the meticulous brushstrokes betraying the artist's focused intent. Leaning closer, my breath catching, I perceived an anomaly near the canvas edge, a subtle dissonance in color, a suggestion of strata. Something lay beneath. Fetching a torch from a kitchen drawer, I played its beam across the suspect area. Yes, unmistakably, the faint, spectral outline of another feature, part of a face, submerged beneath Malachi's likeness. Not background detail, a deliberate concealment. My stomach coiled into a knot. Lifting the heavy frame down, I rested it against the sofa's base. With tentative fingers, I probed a loose edge, attempting to lift the uppermost layer. A minuscule fragment yielded, brittle and dry. Hesitation stayed my hand. Destroying this artifact felt profane. Why overlay one portrait with another? The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken implications. My hands trembled slightly, an annoying betrayal. The painting pulsed with a low, static thrum, an energy just below the threshold of hearing. Rising to fetch water, the simple act of stepping into the kitchen was punctuated by a dull, resonant thud from behind me. I spun, heart leaping, rushing back. The painting remained propped against the sofa, inert. The room held its breath. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. Deep breaths. Late, I told myself. Tired. Sleep offered no refuge. Malachi Vane stood within the familiar landscape of my living room, attired as always, his painted lips moving, shaping silent pronouncements. My name reached me, warped, less a voice than a sibilant rush of air. A low hiss. I awoke violently, slick with sweat, heart battering my ribs. The bedside clock glowed. 3 down a.m. Sleep thereafter was a shore I couldn't reach. Morning rituals felt hollow. Shower, coffee, the deliberate avoidance of the living room's focal point. A stiffness radiated from my neck. My eyes felt gritty with exhaustion. Poor sleep, I reasoned, swallowing a pain reliever with my coffee, the silence amplifying my inner turmoil. Work provided a necessary, if temporary, distraction, yet the dream echoed, that sibilant whisper clinging to the edges of my thoughts. Returning home that evening felt like approaching a precipice. Bracing myself, I opened the door. He hung there, restored to his place on the wall. I compelled myself forward, stood directly before him. The painted face remained unchanged, the eyes fixed. Yet the sensation of being observed had intensified, grown almost palpable. My mouth was desert dry. Reaching out, my fingertips brushed the wooden frame. Cold, a deep, unnatural chill that seeped from the wood. A shiver traced my spine. I forced myself through the motions of the evening, seeking refuge in the small screen of my phone, finding none. Every few minutes, my gaze strayed, pulled magnetically towards the canvas. Later, around 10, tidying the living room, I switched off the lamp, turning to leave. A sudden, overwhelming certainty flooded me. Someone stood directly behind me. My back muscles clenched, heart rate spiking, raw instinct screaming flight. I whirled, breath snagged in my throat. Empty room. The portrait. But the air. It felt compressed, the pressure subtly altered. I gasped for breath, forcing oxygen into constricted lungs, then retreated down the hallway, eyes fixed forward, refusing to look back. That night, supine in bed, eyes tracing patterns on the ceiling, sleep felt impossibly distant. My mind circled the hidden face, the pentimento beneath the varnish. Should I attempt to reveal it? Could that submerged identity hold the key to Malachi Vane, to this haunting? A tightness constricted my chest. Did I truly want to know? The dreams had already shaken me profoundly. Further secrets felt like tempting fate. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, pulling me into restless depths. Again, the man from the portrait materialized. In this iteration, he reached out, his grasp closing around my wrist, a phantom pressure, chillingly real. Then his face flickered, overlaid momentarily by another visage, indistinct as a failing light. A faint knock sounded, directionless. I awoke with a strangled gasp, sheets damp, heart a frantic drum. Nearly 4:01 a.m. The room seemed to tilt. Water, phone checked for non-existent messages, then wakefulness until the grey light of dawn. The following evening, the gnawing unease became intolerable. Action was required. I repositioned a small desk lamp on the floor beside the portrait, fetched a delicate scraper and cotton swabs from the garage's clutter. Kneeling before Malachi Vane, a tremor in my hands, I began tentatively testing the paint layers near the edge. My goal, revelation without ruin. The surface paint yielded in tiny, fragile flakes. Hints of another color emerged, a deeper blue, perhaps, or green. Not background, but form. The rough curve of an eye socket, subtly misaligned with Malachi's own. A sudden draft, icy against my exposed neck, made me flinch and twist around. Empty space yawned behind me. Tension headache pulsed at my temples. I turned back, compelled to continue. After perhaps 30 minutes, knees aching from the hard floor, I rose to stretch. A phone notification buzzed, a friend's message ignored. Focus was a luxury I couldn't afford. I shifted the painting onto the coffee table, seeking a better angle, pushing the lamp closer. More flaking paint revealed the curve of a different mouth, thinner lipped than Malachi's stern line. Beneath the superimposed pigment, the suggestion of another nose began to emerge. Clammy hands, a rising wave of nausea, the desperate urge to see Ward with a profound reluctance to know. Stepping back, gulping air, I felt utterly depleted. It was late. I stopped. The painting was carefully rehung, the microscopic debris wiped away, tools stored. My eyes burned. My back screamed protest. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection startled me. Eyes bloodshot, shadowed beneath by sleeplessness. Dinner remained unmade, untouched. Hunger gnawed, yet appetite was absent. Sleep, or at least the oblivion of lying down, was all I craved. In bed, I left the door ajar, a deviation from habit, born of a need to listen. Darkness settled, punctuated only by the faint sodium glow from the street lamp outside. I lay rigid, senses straining against the silence. For a long while, nothing. Then, near midnight, it came. The floorboard in the living room. That specific board, creaking, louder this time. My muscles seized, cold sweat beaded on my forehead, breath shallow, trapped in my chest. An instinct to curl inward warred with the terrifying necessity of checking. Hallway light flicked on, casting weak illumination into the living room. Stillness. The painting, impassive on the wall. The room, empty. My heart hammered against my sternum. A frantic prisoner. Minutes passed in watchful silence. Nothing more. I retreated to bed. Sleep, when it finally came, was a treacherous country. Malachi Vane's face dissolved, reformed into the second hidden visage, the two identities swapping, flickering like faulty projection. Their mouths moved, shaping silent, frantic words I couldn't decipher. A distinct pressure on my shoulder jolted me awake. The spot tingled, a residual echo, but the room was empty. Pulse frantic, I stared at the ceiling until the first hint of dawn. It has been 2 weeks now since Malachi Vane came home. Looking at him is an exercise in controlled dread, yet the thought of removing him feels impossible, as if I am bound to keep vigil. Every passage through the living room is an ordeal under that painted gaze. My skin crawls, my mind churns. The evidence of the hidden face is undeniable, yet I shrink from completing the excavation. The dreams, the cold spots, the phantom sounds. They escalate. What does it want, this painted enigma? Or is it merely a canvas, and I, the architect of my own haunting? The physical responses argue otherwise. The tightening spine, the clammy palms, the chilling certainty of footsteps pacing just behind me in an empty house. Nights are the crucible. Tension coils in the darkness, my hearing unnaturally sharp, attuned to every sigh of the old house. My jaw aches from unconscious clenching. A persistent feeling endures. The portrait is poised on the verge of some terrible revelation. A psychic pressure building behind my eyes. Curiosity and dread wage a constant, exhausting war within me. I am unready for the truth coiled beneath the layers of paint. The dreams persist. Malachi, or the other, striving to impart a secret lost in static and whispers. I drift, caught between the need to know and the terror of discovery, unsure if I can face what the canvas holds, yet certain I cannot ignore it indefinitely. For now, I navigate the fragile edges of my sanity, day by uncertain day, hoping the answers, when they come, do not shatter me in the deep watches of the night. Brittle snaps of desiccated leaves underfoot, the woodland's sole percussion, until a sibilant murmur threaded the air, distant, chilling the marrow. Motion ceased, ears strained against the silence that followed. Only the sighing zephyr through the pines, surely. Yet rooted there, swallowed by the advancing crepuscule, an undeniable prickle persisted, unseen eyes boring into me from the umbra. The wild called to me, always, the exhilaration of untrodden paths, the testing of sinew and spirit, this Appalachian spine, a promised crucible, a week utterly alone in its remotest folds. Months I'd honed myself, maps memorized, gear perfected, but the sheer weight of solitude, unanticipated. 3 sunrises since the last human face. What beckoned as freedom now pressed inward? A suffocating cloak. Each fractured twig became a gunshot. Every dance and shadow held malevolent potential. A mental shake. "Steady, Silas," the inner voice chided. This isolation was the goal. Adjusting the pack's familiar heft, I plunged onward. Deeper the path coiled into a verdant throat where ancient trees interlocked, strangling the last vestiges of daylight. My headlamp's beam sliced a meager tunnel through the thickening murk, and then a hesitant pulse of luminescence between the trunks. So fugitive, perhaps imagined? No, again, a warm ochre bloom, soft as tallow light. A dwelling? Here, uncharted. Yet the primal lure of warmth, of potential company proved irresistible. I broke from the defined track, forcing passage through grasping briars toward the beacon. The structure materialized from the gloom. Ancient timbers, bleached bone gray by forgotten seasons. A roof bowed beneath time's burden. Yet the window held its flickering vigil. I advanced with predator quiet, leaves whispering betrayal beneath my boots. The porch groaned a funereal protest under my weight. My knuckles hovered before the wood, arrested by a sudden, visceral wrongness. The nape hairs bristled, that unseen gaze returned, intensified, palpable. Dismissing the tremor as fatigue, I tested the latch. Yielding without resistance, the door groaned inward on protesting hinges. A long, dolorous sound. "Is anyone present?" My voice, thin in the stillness. Only silence echoed back. A solitary chamber swam in the lantern's unsteady radiance, perched on a listing table. Dust lay thick as velvet. Cobwebs draped corners like macabre bunting. Decades might have passed since occupancy, and yet the lantern burned bright. Beside it, impossibly, steam curled from a mug, releasing the rich, dark aroma of fresh coffee. My breath hitched. Someone was here, or had been, moments ago. But the space remained empty, expectant. Every nerve screamed retreat, flee, but weariness warred with a morbid fascination. I shed my pack, the thud unnaturally loud. That coffee scent, a siren song after days of bland sustenance. Lifting the mug, its heat and a welcome shock against chilled skin, I nearly succumbed. Just a taste. My gaze drifted and froze. Opposite wall, a corkboard, dense with photographs. Hikers, captured mid-stride on familiar trails. Dozens. And in each frame, subtly woven into the background foliage, a tenebrous shape lingered, watching. The mug plummeted from nerveless fingers, exploding ceramic shards across the floorboards. A backward stagger, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. Then, footfalls, measured, unhurried. Ascending the porch steps, raw panic flared. No refuge in this tiny, exposed box. Closer the steps sounded, each creak of aged wood a hammer blow. A small, grimy window beckoned from the far wall. A desperate lunge. Wrestling the sash open, I hurled myself through the narrow aperture, just as the cabin door swung inward. I hit the earth in a shower of leaf litter. Paralyzed for a heartbeat, prone in the damp leaves. Inside, slow, deliberate rustling. Then a voice, rough as grinding stone, slithered through the night air. I know you're out there, your fear, such a potent scent. Galvanized by terror, I scrambled upright and fled, crashing blindly through the undergrowth, heedless of tearing branches or treacherous roots. Sheer, primal flight propelled me, deeper and deeper into the forest's black maw. Time dissolved. Eventually, lungs ablaze, limbs quivering uncontrollably, I collapsed against the rough bark of an oak. Silence returned, save for the frantic thrumming within my own chest. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving cold reason in its wake. Escape. But how? The panicked flight had erased all bearings. My pack, lifeline, sustenance, map, remained hostage in that cursed shack. Nothing remained but the clothes I wore and the headlamp, which chose that instant to stutter, its beam faltering ominously. Focus, Silas. The pole star, perhaps? Craning my neck toward a perceived gap in the dense canopy, my gaze snagged, and my blood solidified. 20 paces distant, stark against the gloom, a silhouette stood utterly still between two pines. Tall, skeletally thin, a blink and emptiness. A phantom of exhaustion, surely. Yet it reappeared, nearer now, then flickered to my periphery. A cruel game. A sharp crackle behind me. I spun, void. Turning back, it stood inches away. A fleeting impression. Parchment skin stretched taut over bone. Cavernous eye sockets. Lips retracted in a predator's rictus. It surged forward. A choked cry tore from my throat as I stumbled backward, catching a root, crashing heavily to the forest floor. Scrabbling away on hands and knees, bracing for the inevitable grasp. I risked a glance. The space was vacant. Hallucination? Sanity fraying? A low, resonant chuckle seemed to emanate from the very trees around me. Flee as you might, the gravelly voice resonated. You belong to my woods now." A fresh wave of terror lent impossible strength. I lurched upright and ran anew, a desperate stumbling flight through thorn and thicket, over fallen giants, driven only by the need to escape. But the voice pursued, a constant, insidious whisper. "Centuries, I have walked this domain. Your terror is my vintage, your hopelessness, my sustenance." My legs buckled, spent. I collapsed in a small, moon-dappled clearing, lungs searing. No more flight. This, then, was the end. Alone, hunted, awaiting the inevitable. As resignation settled, a new sound pierced the oppressive silence, the sharp bark of a dog. Then, blessedly, human shouts. Beams of artificial light sliced through the darkness. "Hello?" My voice, a ragged croak. "Here, help me!" The calls grew louder, closer. My name, carried on the night air. Rangers, searching since my missed check-in. They erupted into the clearing, their presence a sudden, overwhelming tide of relief. Safety. It was finished. As strong hands helped me rise, my gaze was drawn one last time to the tree line. A pallid visage observed from the deepest shadows, those hollow eyes burning with insatiable hunger, ancient fury. Then, like smoke, it dissolved into the waiting dark. Fortunate, the Rangers declared me. Exposure, dehydration, a significant blow to the head from a fall. Remarkable survival, they murmured, politely dismissing my fragmented narrative of cabins and creatures as delirium born of trauma. As my body healed, doubt gnawed. Could it truly have been fever dreams, the mind cracking under duress? Yet in the quiet solitude of sleepless nights, that guttural chuckle sometimes echoes in memory's corridors. And I understand, with chilling certainty, that deep within those ancient, shadowed woods, something patient and ravenous endures. Waiting, watching. It hungers for the next soul careless enough to stray from the path. Those woods will never feel my tread again. Yet a fragment of me remains trapped there, forever listening for footsteps on the porch, forever haunted by a feral grin glimpsed in the dark, forever wondering if escape was ever truly possible. The tremor of realization hit me the instant I witnessed the exchange. A plump manila envelope, thick with unspoken implications, sliding from one manicured hand to another amidst the swirling dust motes of the makeshift relief depot. Two figures in sharp tailoring, incongruous against the backdrop of stacked water bottles and donated blankets. In that stark tableau, clarity pierced through the exhaustion. This deluge wasn't merely about reclamation and aid. For some, the floodwaters were washing in opportunity, slick and dark. I'd enlisted, like so many others, when the river, swollen and furious, had devoured whole neighborhoods, leaving behind a landscape of splintered homes and shattered lives. Our city reeled from its worst cataclysm in living memory, thousands adrift, clinging to remnants. My desire was simple, elemental, to lend a hand, to offer solace. I hadn't anticipated wading into a confluence of desperation and avarice, potent enough to drown me. Those initial days bled into a frantic rhythm of sorting, distributing, comforting. Endless hours spent ladling soup, finding dry bedding, murmuring reassurances. The labor was bone-deep wearying, yet it hummed with purpose, a tangible sense that my small efforts mattered against the tide of suffering. But perhaps a week into this relentless cycle, discordant notes began to surface. Inventories meticulously logged as dispersed, yet the corresponding pallets remained stubbornly present. Generous donations arriving fanfare-free, vanishing before documentation, and always the quiet presence of those expensively clad men, their low conversations weaving through the warehouse like unseen currents. At first, I dismissed the unease. Fatigue plays tricks, I reasoned. Chaos breeds clerical errors. Surely, in such upheaval, inefficiencies were inevitable. Yet a persistent knot tightened in my gut. The feeling solidified one evening when I lingered late, organizing a newly arrived cache of medical supplies. The warehouse cavern felt deserted, steeped in quietude, until whispers slithered from the cramped back office. Angry whispers, escalating. Drawn by an irresistible, perhaps foolish curiosity, I navigated the labyrinth of boxes, easing myself into the shadows near the door, left conveniently ajar. Inside, 2 men stood, illuminated by a bare bulb. Marcus Thorne, the charismatic director of our entire operation, and a municipal dignitary whose face I recalled from televised briefings. "This pittance?" the official hissed, brandishing an envelope identical to the one I'd seen before. The favors I called in, the risks I took diverting those resources here. Thorne's face flushed, a mask of strained control. "It's what we can bleed off currently. The balance follows when the next consignment is liquidated." Liquidated? My breath hitched. These weren't commodities, they were lifelines, donated in good faith for the dispossessed. A gasp, perhaps, or the scuff of my shoe. Suddenly, both pairs of eyes snapped towards the doorway. I shrank back, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "See who's out there," Thorne commanded, his voice dangerously low. "Confirm privacy." I didn't linger for discovery. Melting back into the deeper shadows, I retrieved my satchel with feigned nonchalance, my pulse a frantic drum against the forced calm of my stride towards the exit. Sleep eluded me that night, my apartment walls closing in as the overheard words echoed. This wasn't mere pilfering, it was calculated systemic plunder on an appalling scale. If they could siphon hope from the flood's victims, what boundaries wouldn't they cross? Returning the next day demanded a new resolve. Walking away felt like complicity. While outwardly resuming the role of the tireless volunteer, Ilara, I became a silent archivist of deceit. My eyes now saw the discrepancies with sharp clarity. Mental tallies, furtive snapshots captured on my phone's camera, patterns noted in a small hidden journal. For a week, I moved through their midst, a ghost collecting evidence, convinced of my own discretion. But in an environment charged with such high stakes, anonymity is a fragile illusion. It was Lena who broke the silence, another volunteer, younger still, her idealism mirroring what mine had been. We'd bonded over shared exhaustion and grim humor. She cornered me after a long shift, her gaze flicking nervously around the emptying space. "Ilara, be careful," she breathed, words tumbling out in a rush. "They're asking about you. Thorne, he suspects." I attempted a reassuring smile, a denial, but the icy tendrils of fear tightened within me. That night, the decision crystallized. It was time. The fragments I'd gathered weren't conclusive proof, perhaps, but surely enough to ignite a formal inquiry. I never made it to the authorities. Arriving the following morning, I found the warehouse precinct alive with flashing lights and uniformed officers. A flicker of misplaced hope surged. Had someone else blown the whistle? Was the rot finally being excised? Then I saw Marcus Thorne deep in conversation with two policemen, gesturing subtly, unmistakably in my direction. The officers detached themselves, approaching me with expressions carved from stone. "Ma'am," one stated flatly, "we need you to accompany us. There are inquiries regarding missing inventory." The world tilted. They weren't being caught. They were ensnaring me. The speed, the audacity of it, stole my breath. 12 hours dissolved in the sterile confines of an interrogation room. The same questions, looped and rephrased. They produced doctored manifests bearing a forgery of my signature, grainy security footage cleverly edited to depict me loading boxes into my own vehicle. Lies woven into a disturbingly plausible tapestry. Had I not lived the truth, I might have doubted myself. They released me eventually, bruised but not charged, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. Persist, and ruination awaited. Defeat tasted metallic that night, fear a constant shivering companion in my darkened apartment. Against such entrenched influence, what recourse did one woman possess? Yet, as the hours crawled by, punctuated by every creak and groan of the building, a slow burn began. Anger, hot and righteous, started to cauterize the fear. How dare they prey on the broken? How dare they twist my attempt to help into a crime? The realization dawned. Alone, I was vulnerable, but perhaps I wasn't truly alone. Lena's face swam into view, followed by others, the quiet ones, the watchful ones, whose unease I'd glimpsed, and beyond them, the countless faces of those shivering in temporary shelters, robbed twice over. My outreach began tentatively, a hushed exchange during a shared task, a carefully phrased query over lukewarm coffee. Slowly, cautiously, I found them. Others who had witnessed anomalies, harbored suspicions, but felt suffocated by fear. We coalesced, a fragile network bound by shared outrage. It was a perilous undertaking. Close calls became routine. Returning home one evening to find my apartment meticulously overturned, a violation meant to intimidate. Another day, the unnerving presence of a sedan mirroring my movements across the city for hours. Fear became a constant hum beneath the surface, a knot perpetually cinched in my stomach. Yet we pushed forward, pooling observations, corroborating timelines, piecing together the damning mosaic. Weeks bled into months, until finally, armed with a dossier thick with evidence, we bypassed the compromised city channels and approached the state investigators. What unfolded next surpassed anything I could have envisioned. Suddenly, I was conferring with federal agents, providing sworn testimony, helping unravel a conspiracy that dwarfed our local warehouse operation. The flood, it transpired, was merely the latest venture in a long-running enterprise of disaster capitalism, orchestrated by Thorne and his shadowy associates. Their tendrils reached deep, entwining politicians, influencing judicial appointments across multiple states. The scale was breathtaking, sickening. The day the arrests were broadcast felt like a strange admixture of vindication and profound unease. From the sterile safety of a protected location, I watched Thorne and the others, faces grim, being led away in handcuffs. But the victory felt incomplete. shadowed by the knowledge that figures like these cast long shadows, possessed tenacious memories, and wielded influence that incarceration might not entirely nullify. Soon after, Alara ceased to exist. A new identity, a different city, a life rebuilt from the ground up under the shield of witness protection. 5 years have passed. Sometimes the ghost of my former life whispers. Friends, family, the familiar streets I relinquished. Then I remember the faces in the shelters, the quiet dignity of those we ultimately helped by dragging the truth into the harsh light. The urge to contribute, to alleviate suffering, persists. I still find myself ladling soup in shelters, sorting donations for the homeless. But now, a layer of vigilance overlays the compassion, an awareness of the potential darkness coiled beneath surfaces, even within endeavors cloaked in nobility. Occasionally, watching news reports of floods, fires, storms elsewhere, a familiar chill traces my spine. I wonder if, in those disaster zones, others are grappling with the same insidious truths I uncovered, weighing the risks, wrestling with conscience. I can only hope they find the courage, because corruption, as my experience burned into me, festers best in obscurity. It requires illumination, the unwavering beam of truth held steady by brave hands, regardless of the personal cost. So, if you find yourself standing in those shadows, witnessing the wrong turn, the quiet theft, the betrayal of trust, do not turn away. Let your voice be heard. Resist. The path is arduous, perhaps the most demanding you will ever tread. But it matters, because truth, ultimately, is the bedrock. And perhaps one day, through the cumulative courage of individuals like us, there will be no shadows left deep enough for the corrupt to conceal their deeds.